So I've been a bookseller for almost 40 years. I specialize in rare books, documents, and artifacts. And during the past 40 years, I have noticed that one genre of book, or one book in particular, has appreciated more in value than any other book or segment or genre of books. What is it? A first edition copy of the Book of Mormon, or Mormon books in general. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about collecting Mormon books, or books pertaining to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What is the Holy Grail for most people who want to collect Mormon books? The first edition Book of Mormon. I have 4 copies right here. Now, the first edition Book of Mormon has a unique look. It was typically bound in calfskin with 7 double-banded lines with a black label, although there were red labels and tan labels, and I have one on here that has a tan label, but black seems to be about 98-99%. Now, why does this book look that way? I can tell you with certainty that it's because in 1830, that's exactly what the Bible looked like. Now, if you're looking at this, it almost looks identical to that. Well, that was the goal. It's supposed to look like Scripture when you see it. If I put these two together, you can see 7 double-banded gold lines, black label, even going so far as the title page where it goes, The Book of Mormon, down at the end, bottom, 1830. If we open the title page up, it goes almost the same. The Holy Bible, last thing on there, 1830, New York. This particular printing of the Bible is the model for a first edition copy of the Book of Mormon. That's pretty cool. There were 5,000 copies printed in the year 1830. Of those 5,000 copies, between 500 and 750 copies have survived. During the past 20 years, I have tracked down over 300 copies that I have acquired and sold. These are the ones I still have, and they happen to be some pretty cool copies. I'll get to that in a sec. When I started selling these books back in the 1980s, this book was $3,000. The last copy I sold was over $200,000. That's almost like a 7,000% increase. Why? Part of it is supply and demand. There's almost never a copy just sitting out there. I literally have a waiting list of dozens of people who want this book, which shows me the market still hasn't set the price. What do you look for when you're buying a book? Well, you want one that has the original binding. That's the original binding. You want one that has the original title page, and you want the complete text. The title page is easily worth 40% of the value of a book. And if we're taking a value of $200,000, if it's missing the title page, that is an $80,000 flaw. That is one of the most expensive title pages there is, but it's the character of the book, so it's really valuable. If it has a different binding, that's at least a 35% flaw. So if you're missing a title page and the binding, then it drops the book below 100,000. Each of these books age differently. If I open this up, you'll see there are a few minor spots. This is called foxing. It's just natural aging. It's like age spots for books. You can see a few, but it's not as bad as some books that I've seen. If you want to know if a book collates perfectly, like it is just like it came off the printing press, there are 3 blank pages in the back. So this one has the 3, and there are 2 blank pages in the front. There's 1, there's 2. So this one, and then there's the title page, and after the title page, there's the preface, and then the text starts. Something that is different about the first edition also, the end, and then you have what's called the witness page. So that is what you're looking for. You want all of those. If it's missing, that definitely affects the value of the book. Now, what else can make a book valuable? It's provenance, or the history of ownership. This particular book is worth 10 to 20 times what a regular copy is. Why? Because it's owned by somebody who was historically significant, Hyrum Smith. And then you look at this copy of the book, We don't know. It has a name in there. I've never heard of it, so that's not going to affect the value of that book. Same with this book, but this book, even though it's well used, happened to belong to Joseph Smith's younger brother, Samuel Smith. So this one, that is a many times multiple of value. These are part of my personal collection right there. Now, if you're buying a book, you want to make sure that it has original title page, all the text, and the original binding. And then you're probably looking at, in today's market, $200,000. But if it's an exceptional copy, it can go up, or if it has water damage or other damage, then it goes down. But just a good complete copy in today's market is about $200,000. Now, after the first edition Book of Mormon, 3 years later, the Mormons printed another book of scripture called the Book of Commandments. Now, I don't have an original copy currently. I did a few years ago, but there are only 29 known copies, and about 20 are institutional copies, which means there's only about 9 in private hands. But that is the size of it. And it has a pretty interesting story. Very few copies, like I said, have survived. But if you find one of those, that starts at $1 million. $1 to $3 million is kind of the going price for a Book of Commandments. That is absolutely one of the most expensive books printed in the 20th century. 29 known copies. Now, 2 years later, they kind of did another version of this, but they added what were called the Lectures on Faith to get what is called the Doctrine and Covenants. Now, the Doctrine and Covenants was printed in 1835. As few as 100 of those have survived, and it tends to be in the same price range as a first edition Book of Mormon. For a good, clean copy, a couple $100,000. But if it has issues, if it's damaged, it can be substantially less. I saw one 2 days ago that was water damaged, but it complete. That one was probably only worth about $75,000. This is a very collectible book too, but more people want the Book of Mormon than the Doctrine and Covenants. So even though there are 7 times as many as this book, it sells for about the same for a first edition. Now, in 1851, there was a pamphlet. It was originally a pamphlet printed, which later was canonized as scripture, called The Pearl of Great Price. And this is a first edition right here. The date on that is 1851. A little over 7,000 copies were printed, but it's surprisingly scarce today. You just don't see that many copies. And the price on these range from $10,000 to $30,000 because it was a pamphlet. So they have a variety of bindings, and then again, there's Provenance. This one actually belonged to one of the early Mormon apostles. After the first edition Book of Mormon, 7 years later, they were out of the first edition, so they printed another copy in Kirtland, Ohio. By this time, the Mormons had gone from New York to Ohio. Here is what is called a second edition of the Book of Mormon, 1837. There are far fewer copies. Instead of 5,000 copies, there were probably about 3,000 copies of this printed, and just not many copies have survived of this one. But its price, even though it's more scarce, is about half of this. So around $75,000 to $100,000 is the price currently of a second edition. Very small and compact. Why small and compact? Because missionaries were going out and they could take more copies. In 1840, they printed another copy. By this time, the Mormons or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have gone from Ohio to Illinois. And they, in the town of Nauvoo on the banks of the Mississippi, they did the third edition. Now, a third edition is probably $40,000 to $60,000. That's kind of the going range. And then in 1841, they did what was called the first European or Liverpool edition. This is actually a replica of it, but it's actually a very valuable replica because this is a replica made during the sesquicentennial of the first missionaries arriving in the UK, 1837 to 1987. And this is the copy that belonged to one of the presidents of the church, Ezra Taft Benson, so it actually makes it a very valuable copy. But that's the size. So there were pretty much 4 different printings of the Book of Mormon during the life of Joseph Smith. There was a 5th printing It was a Nauvoo, but it was using the same plates and everything, so it has a new title page. Everything else is pretty much the same. But those are the most collectible books, early scriptures, especially the ones printed during the life of Joseph Smith. Now, I understand these are pretty pricey books, tens of thousands of dollars, over $100,000. But you can collect early Mormon books, even copies of the Book of Mormon, on any budget for a few dollars. You can go to used bookstores, you'll see copies, because there are hundreds of editions over the years. If you find like a 1964 World's Fair edition, that's kind of cool. That's a $50 to $250 book if it has the dust jacket on it. You can collect foreign language. There are about 120 foreign languages, many of them very recent. So you can start your collection and find those books, but by far the earliest are the rarest. Now, the first edition Book of Mormon was 1830. The first time it's printed in a foreign language is 1851, and that is the Danish Book of Mormon. Then in 1852, they printed 4, German, French, Italian, and Welsh. And then in 1855 is Hawaiian, and then it keeps going. Now, speaking of French, here is a first edition French 1852 copy of the Book of Mormon in this presentation binding. For comparison, a first edition French Book of Mormon is typically in the 5,000 to 10,000 range. But if you get one of the very rare copies inscribed by the publisher and later president of the church, John Taylor, all of a sudden that makes it a $75,000 to $100,000 book. It's extremely rare to find a copy signed by a Mormon prophet, and one in that condition is just amazing. Believe it or not, that is not even close to the most valuable foreign language copy of the Book of Mormon. The two rarest of the foreign language copies of the Book of Mormon are, numbers-wise, German. German is the rarest. Then the Hawaiian. But the Hawaiian still tends to bring a bigger number. The German, there's maybe, according to Peter Crawley, 2-3 dozen. The Hawaiian Book of Mormon is the one that sells for even more than a first edition copy of the Book of Mormon in English, which is just crazy. Now, here is a first edition copy of the Book of Mormon in Hawaiian. Fewer than 30 have survived, but it's highly sought after, and George Buchanan was instrumental in getting this printed in San Francisco. And in his own journal, he says, I took the first copy off the press and had it specially bound for then President of the church, Brigham Young, and this is Brigham Young's copy of the Hawaiian. That, all of a sudden, a Hawaiian copy of the Book of Mormon, if you find one, is typically $250,000 to $350,000, but if it has a story, then it's a multiple of that. That literally is $1 million copy of a foreign language Book of Mormon. But and I promised you, there's a budget for every copy, no matter what your budget is. Here is a 1920 edition. You can find these for $50 to $100. That's over 100 years old. So you can find those in used bookshops or online. Now, there's one more that I have. I'm talking about first edition foreign language. Did you know the first edition Norwegian has a dust jacket, and it's excessively rare? I've only ever in 40 years seen one, and it's on this copy right here. So collecting copies of the Book of Mormon can be a lot of fun because there's so many variables, and these things have been kept by families, passed down, and they surface, so you never know what you're going to find. And I have put together a collection of the first 100 foreign languages, and that's quite a feat to do that. Hopefully you have enjoyed this brief video on collecting early Mormon scripture. Stay tuned to this channel. I plan to do 2 additional videos on collecting early Mormon documents, currency, and other books. Thanks again for watching, and this is Reid Moon with Moon's Rare Books in Provo, Utah.